Well, Doctor Who, Season 12. Doctor Who's been a show that has been the topic of much debate and controversy over the last year or so, when they introduced the first female Doctor. That, in it of itself, is not the issue as much as it's another franchise that's taking the fundamental character and changing everything that we've known it to be for such a long time. It's caused a lot of fans to drop out, to start criticizing the show, the writing, not because of misogynistic reasons, but because it's breaking the lore, breaking the canon. But nonetheless, it has gone on, and now with this newest episode, we have a show that now does to Doctor Who what I would say what happened with Star Wars, which might be happening with Star Trek, depending on where Picard goes. You're changing the very foundation of the show now. No longer, it's not even just the canon or the lore, it's the very fabric of what the show is and has always been. And for what reason? Progress, I guess, is what they say. Or striving forward into uncharted territories. It doesn't work when you have a fan base and a show that's been so established for so long, and now you're going to just throw something in to try to shake things up and subvert expectations. The same thing that The Last Jedi did with Star Wars. We're seeing here now with Doctor Who. This article is coming from Gizmodo, and Doctor Who's showrunner wants you to know that the new Time Lord is no joke. We're getting serious with this one. All right. And there she is. This is the new but yet old Doctor. We're not quite sure yet. We take it you've heard the news about the Doctors Who. Jodie Whittaker is no longer the only active Doctor running around in the BBC series. The fans have understandably been scrambling to make sense of the revelation. In the 5th episode of Doctor Who's current season, it's revealed that Ruth Clayton, Jo Martin, is actually another incarnation of the Doctor who may or may not predate Whittaker's Doctor. In a recent interview with The Mirror, showrunner Chris Chibnall gave casting director Nita Mazur credit for the casting idea, adding that Martin was the best person for the job. As it turns out, the actress wasn't told who she was auditioning for exactly. The best person for the job, but who were you casting from? The best human for the job, or the best female for the job, or the best... What exactly does the best person for the job mean? Clearly there was an agenda here. You're casting another woman as a Doctor, which might predate the current Doctor. So what does that mean? The theory is that this is the original Doctor, the first of all Doctors, who is now going to be a woman, which completely disregards decades of backstory and lore. We have seen glimpses of the Doctor's backstory, and it has always been a male, an older gentleman, but we've also seen glimpses of him as a child. So I don't know how they're going to explain all this. I don't know if they know how they're going to explain all this. They just seem to be writing things and coming up with stories, and we'll figure it out if it makes sense later. Who cares? That seems to be the mindset here. Who cares? But she's a massive fan of the show, and I think she guessed, Chibnall said. I had to ring her up and tell her, and she was overwhelmed and thrilled. A lot of her family and fans, and she kept that secret brilliantly for so long. Nobody knew. We filmed it in the middle of last year. So, she's such a massive fan of the show. I question things like that, not saying she's not a fan of the show, but if I were, as a massive Star Wars fan, if I were to say be cast in the role of Luke Skywalker, and the role of Luke Skywalker was that he was a bum on an island who's given up everything and given up the Force, and my goodness, he's become a recluse, and he's not a hero anymore. I would have a lot of reservations taking that role on, being a fan. We know that Mark Hamill has, because unfortunately he was under contract and misled about the character when he signed on, because George had talked him into it before he sold it to Disney. But nevertheless, we know he had a lot of issues. He's been very vocal about his opinion on Jake Skywalker, because because he is a fan of his own character and the Star Wars universe, and he was very passionate and outspoken about his misgivings. Because it's not every day that a new Doctor just pops onto the scene, smugly screaming, "Plot twist!" There's been a fair amount of speculation as to how her origins will be explained. One of the theories that's been gaining traction among fans is that Martin's Doctor might actually be from a parallel universe, which would be a rather easy way of bringing her into the mix on a technical level, while working around some narrative complications. However, Chibnall explained that parallel dimensions aren't at all the reason for the new Doctor's existence. The important thing to say is she is definitely the Doctor. There's no sort of parallel universe going on. There's no tricks, he said. Jo Martin is the Doctor. That's why we gave her the credit at the end, which all new Doctors have the first time you see them. John Hurt got that credit, and now she is too. It shouldn't need to be clarified that Martin's officially one of the Doctor Who's, but her being a black woman was all but certain to inspire some within the fandom to come out of the woodwork proclaiming she wasn't a real Time Lord. So here's where they start attacking any fan who has any issue with the fact that despite lore, history, the whole show's foundation, that they have an African American woman as the Doctor, but it's not just that; it's the first Doctor, that they are now changing the fundamentals of that character. Some people, might say, "Who cares? It doesn't matter." But I would say that to the original writers and the creators of the show who write, and I'm just not talking this show, I'm talking in general, the creators of any character, any comic, Stan Lee, from now on, will have no say in what anyone decides to do, what Marvel decides to do with any of his characters. But aren't you not respecting what they, the original artist, the original creator, wanted for their characters? You're disregarding their original point of why they came up with that character in the first place, what that was supposed to represent. And that's where the real issue lies here. Disregarding the foundations of what grew the fan base originally, and also what the original creator had intended that to be. Let's move on. Those people are likely still going to be all kinds of salty about the fact that the Doctor Who's finally leaning into its fantastical potential and really, really pivoting away from the idea that white men are the only people who can be heroes. Well, there you have it. White men pivoting away from the idea that white men are the only people that can be heroes. And it's finally leaning into its fantastical potential. It's this show for the decades that it's been on the air, the fan base, the Whovians who have loved this show for so long, and they never really got it. They weren't really loving a show because it didn't reach its fantastical potential yet. Now that we can push the barriers beyond what we thought was ever imaginable, now it's reaching its fantastic potential and pivoting away from the idea, this sick, toxic idea that white men are the only people who can be heroes. But regardless of how that contingent of the fandom feels, Martin's Doctor is here to stay for the time being, and every sign points to her being a harbinger for a whole new slew of new things that are certain to make Doctor Who's future that much more interesting. Well, regardless of how the showrunners feel and the writers and the author of this article, I wouldn't be so sure. You know, the viewing audience is going to decide whether or not this show stays on the air and how much longer. Unless the network really feels like just losing money for the heck of it, hey, maybe they do. And sure, I guess so. But I would say that losing your audience in such a strong way, and pretty much insulting a majority of them by saying that it's pivoting away from this idea that white men are the only ones who can be heroes. I would say that there's probably a good amount of men and white men that are that make up a majority of the fan base. I know there are plenty of females as well, of all race and colors and creeds, and I don't know. Some of them might feel insulted by this as well. But for sure, as a white man who likes this show, I take this as you don't really want me to be invested in this show anymore. You're singling me out and excluding me from this. These showrunners, for being so brave and making such progressive choices, if they really cared, the real tragedy is with all these things, Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, Marvel, it goes on and on. The real tragedy, I feel, is to the groups that they claim to represent. If they really, really wanted to make a movement of strong female-led characters, why take something that's got such a history and a lore and foundation and just try to flip it around? You're not believing in whatever it is, whatever group you're claiming to be pushing and projecting and you know, backing. You're not really believing it, because if you did, you would come up with something. Instead of just destroying something, you would come up with something new, with a great idea, great storytelling, fantastic character development, and you could sell anything you wanted, no matter what race, color, sexual preference. It would not matter. Gender, it wouldn't matter. If it was well done, people would get behind it. But you don't do that. You don't. You just take something. You're just in the business of destruction. You want to just destroy as much as you can, move on to the next thing, destroy that until there's nothing left. Eventually, if viewership continues to go down, these studios are not going to keep putting out this stuff because they're not going to want to keep losing money. I mean, I don't think so. It's insane. It's an insane idea. But that's what I believe is the real tragedy, that the groups that you claim to represent and be fully behind, you're not really, because you don't trust them enough to give them their own show, a new character, its own thing. You just want to take stuff that's already established, destroy it, destroy the fan base, flip it around, and then say it's in the name of progress, and then call anyone who criticizes that a name: racist, bigots, misogynistic, whatever it is. It's an old trope by now. But unfortunately, that's where we're at in entertainment. If you love something and it has a history and they change it by its foundation, you can't disagree with it, or you're called names. Which is basically why the Fandom Menace exists in the first place. Tired of being called names for criticizing things that fundamentally shake the very foundation and fabric of all these IPs that we love so much. And there you have it. So this is the newest bit of news on another IP that seems to be really just taking it to the max, trying to change as much about the show as they possibly can to push out the fan base that helped to grow it to be as big as it is, and hoping to attract a new fan base, which time will tell, but I don't believe that's going to work. I don't believe that fan base is as passionate as the ones that were there to help build this show over the last few decades. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I'll talk to you next time. Until then, lock the doors and hope they don't have blasters.